Hi, everybody. Today's Wednesday, January 7th, 2026, and our dear friend Scott Ritter is here with us. Welcome back, Scott.
Thanks for having me.
Please hit the like button, helping us reaching more people. And Scott, let me start with what has happened with the tanker called, with the oil tanker called Marinera. The Russian Ministry of Transport they have they have published some sort of comments on the seizure of this tanker in the Atlantic. They say on December 24th, 2025, the tanker Marinera received temporary authorization to sail under the Russian state flag, issued in accordance with the Russian law and international legal norms. Today, around 3 p.m. Moscow time, the U.S. naval force boarded the vessel on the high seas outside of outside the territorial waters of any state. Contact contact with the ship was subsequently lost under the 1982 UN Convention on the Law of the Sea. The high sea are governed by the principle of freedom of navigation. No state has the right to use force against vessels lawfully registered under the jurisdiction of another state. What is going on in the mind of the Trump administration, and what was the necessity of doing this, Scott?
Well, first of all, we need to understand that the Trump administration is a rogue government at this point in time. It doesn't operate in accordance with the rule of law. And they all but admit it. They say we are about might makes right. What strength will allow us to do, we will do. Um, Marco Rubio has said that international law just doesn't matter. The United Nations doesn't matter. The United Nations Charter doesn't matter. None of the legal frameworks that hold the world together matter anymore. The only thing that matters is American power, American might. Um, and it's just so flagrant. When you have the ambassador of the United States to the United Nations in the Security Council say that, America will determine how Venezuelan oil is used, who gets to buy it, who doesn't get to buy it. That there's no basis in law for this. The kidnapping of Maduro is a blatantly illegal act, and we've now committed an act of piracy on the open seas. And that's what it is. It's piracy. There is no legal framework that allows this to happen. And the U.S. court systems have been corrupted because apparently the Coast Guard was acting on a warrant that was issued by the Southern District of New York, allowing them to seize this ship. But there is no constitutional authority for this warrant. Let's just make it clear that the United States is bound by treaties that have been signed by presidents, ratified by the United States Senate, and therefore, under the Constitution of the United States, become the supreme law of the land. There has been no congressional legislation passed that modifies these treaties in a way to give the courts a hook, because the only time the courts have a hook is if Congress has taken legislative action, and now the courts get to determine the constitutionality of the interpretation of the treaty as it deals with congressional legislation. But void of congressional legislation, the treaty is the supreme law of the land. And when you take a look at the various Supreme Court decisions that have been passed on this very issue, I think there was one that was passed in 1884. Justice Miller, I think, was the author of this. But basically, he said, look, when you have a treaty and you have treaty disputes, basically treaties come down to the honor and the intent of the nations involved, and the interests, of the nations involved. The United States has no honor anymore, none whatsoever. There is no honor, and our interests are purely selfish. And so basically, at this juncture, problems about treaties are resolved by war. I just want to point this out. This is not a law enforcement operation that's taking place. There is no law to be enforced here. This is a rogue operation, an act of piracy. The consequence is either the capitulation of Russia or war. That's what it comes down to. The United States has determined that it alone will, decide how Venezuelan oil is, dealt with on the open market. So we've imposed sanctions that have no weight under international law. We don't get to launch an embargo of Venezuela is an act of war, literally an act of war. This isn't figurative. This isn't hyperbole. It's a literal act of war. So if we are enforcing an embargo, a blockade of Venezuela, then we've declared war. But did you see Congress declare war? No, because the president says, I don't need to go to Congress. I'm the frickin' dictator. I am Donald Trump. And he acts as a not just virtual. He is a dictator. Congress has punted. There is no congressional roadblock whatsoever. And the courts have punted because they're doing whatever he wants, regardless of what the Constitution says. So the United States has ceased functioning as a constitutional republic. And today we function as a dictatorship run by this cult of personality called Donald Trump. What Donald wants, Donald gets. I mean, it's become absurd. When we have people talking about the Monroe Doctrine, they go, it's the Don Roe Doctrine. I mean, is this a Saturday Night Live skit? I mean, is this what America's become? A frickin' joke? A running joke? I mean, we have senators of the United States, Lindsey Graham comes to mind, just joyfully bleeding. I mean, having an orgasm live on TV as he thinks about the fact that he now has a president that just throws the rule of law out. And this is a man who sits, as the chair of the Judiciary Committee of the Senate. This is what I mean. We don't function as a constitutional republic anymore. This is an act of war, an act of piracy. Let's see what Russia does. I mean, I just wrote a piece and, I'm an American. I love my country, but my country is a constitutional republic, not a rogue nation carrying out acts of piracy. And a Coast Guard ship that has boarded a Russian flagged vessel, lawfully flagged vessel in open seas is a pirate vessel. And I said, it's time to smack the camel in the nose. And what I mean by that, there's an old Middle East saying that once the camel sticks its nose under the tent, if you don't stop it, it's in the tent. And the United States right now is sticking its nose under the tent of the rule of law. We're basically saying that there is no rule of law. And if someone doesn't smack us in the nose and cause us to pull back, we will start doing anything. I mean, there is no stopping us. Once we do, I mean, I have to laugh at Europe right now. Oh, we're supporting this action, the act of piracy. Yeah, what are you going to do tomorrow when Trump takes over Greenland? Because it's the same thing, guys. Once you allow him to do this, he's just going to keep doing it. It's time for the camel to get smacked on the nose, because if we don't, we're looking at World War III. Because this won't end until American boots are on the ground in Ukraine, because Donald Trump will continue to push what are American interests. And eventually he'll just deem that the Russians are bluffing, and he'll put American troops on the ground in Ukraine, and then we all die. So this is a very serious thing. This is an extremely serious thing. It's an act of aggression. It's an illegal act of piracy. And it sickens me as an American to believe that, men and women in the uniform of the United States military are executing these orders. That warrant is not a lawful document, because no U.S. court can authorize an act of piracy. And yet that's what they've done.
Scott, what is the outcome of kidnapping the president of Venezuela? What is the outcome, and what was the desired outcome for the Trump administration? Are they going to achieve that?
Well, understand that it didn't happen in a vacuum. I mean, they already achieved. What do you mean, are they going to achieve it? They got him. He's ours. We own him.
Yeah.
He's in a prison right now.
But the outcome, I want to see the big picture of what would be the outcome, the way that the United States, what does the United States want from Venezuela that under the Maduro, administration, they couldn't achieve that. That's why they're
No,
doing this.
you're missing the whole point. To have a Maduro administration means that the United States recognizes sovereignty. The United States published a national security strategy document in November of 2025, and everybody poo-pooed it. I laugh in the face of these people. Yeah, I just have to apologize, Naeem. I've come to the point right now where I just don't care about ignorance anymore. I hate stupidity. And there's a whole bunch of really stupid people out there right now who think they know what the hell's going on, and they don't. when they published that document, I said, this is a real document. Oh, no, it's not. It's just Trump blowing smoke. No, it's a real document, and it's real policy, and it's being implemented as we speak. And that document said that America is going to create Fortress America in the Western Hemisphere, and that we own everything. Read the document very carefully. We own all the resources of the Western Hemisphere. Whether you agree with me or not, it doesn't. We own Canadian oil. Wake up, Canada. We own your oil. You're not going to get to sell that oil on the open market the way you think you want to. You will sell that oil the way we tell you. We own Greenland. We haven't taken it over formally, but we're going to. We own the Panama Canal. Oh, China, that $1.3 billion port that you built in Chancay, Peru, we own that. We own all the train networks that you've put in there. We own the lithium triangle, where 60% of the world's lithium is contained between Argentina, Chile, and I think Bolivia, maybe. But we own all this. We say we own it. These resources cannot be used by outside powers, by non-hemispheric powers. So what are we doing in Venezuela? We're putting the marker down. We own Venezuela. We own everything about Venezuela. And we're telling Colombia, we own you too. We're telling Mexico, we own you too. We're telling everybody, we own you. And if you choose to operate in a manner that implies independence of operation outside of American domination, then we will take your leaders and we will punish you. The CIA has done a tremendous amount of preparatory work in Venezuela. It hasn't come out yet. We bought off the military. I mean, there's going to be hell to pay once the investigations are done. You could see a civil war in Venezuela because there are 100 people died. I mean, this was not, going in and grabbing somebody coming out. We murdered 100 people. 32 of them were Cuban security forces who apparently didn't have night vision goggles. So when the United States turned out the lights and Delta Force streamed in with their night vision goggles, they didn't stand a chance. They wounded 7 Delta guys because they fired haphazardly, but Delta fires with precision and killed everybody. But apparently we killed everybody. I mean, civilian servants in the house, they died. Civilians on the street who got in the way of the suppressive fire laid down on various sites throughout Caracas, they died. We slaughtered 100 people to capture this guy. We don't care about human life. We simply don't care. There's not a tear shed in America for any of the people that were murdered by the Joint Special Operations Command in carrying out this raid. We will kill Colombians. We will kill Mexicans. We will kill Canadians. We will kill Greenlanders. We will kill anybody who gets in our way. This is where we stand as the United States of America. It's disgusting. It's absolutely disgusting because I've always believed that America should be the most powerful nation in the world because we need to prevail in any legitimate conflict. But what we have, that power is always constrained by the Constitution. And our status as a constitutional republic, our status as a nation governed by the rule of law, not just domestically, but in terms of our interaction with the global community. And I just want to remind your audience that the United Nations Charter is a treaty that's been signed by an American president, ratified by 2/3 of the United States Senate, and therefore, under the Constitution, is the supreme law of the land. So anytime you hear an idiot like Marco Rubio or people in your chat or anybody else saying, the international law doesn't matter, fuck off. It matters. It's real. And without it, we live in a jungle. And the United States today, when you hear Marco Rubio say, the United Nations doesn't matter, what he's saying is, I have no respect for the Constitution of the United States of America. Because there is due process. If we decide that the United Nations Charter is incompatible with the United States, with the constitutional republic called the United States, then we do things like withdraw from the Charter. Or we pass legislation to modify the treaty, which we're allowed to do. And we can do things like that. But just to sit there and say it's no longer convenient to us, so we're just going to do that means that we are no longer a constitutional republic, that the rule of law doesn't matter. And every American has to understand it. This is why ICE roams the streets of American cities today and detains American cities without fear of consequence, because the rule of law doesn't matter. We've allowed this narcissist, this Caligula, this cult of personality to basically say what I want, I get, and nobody gets in his way domestically and now internationally. This is why I believe that the camel needs to be punched in the nose. Russia, sink the fucking Coast Guard ship. Send a signal. Draw a line. Because if you don't, the camel's going to be in the tent. And then it's all over. Then it's World War III.
Yeah, I think we are heading toward that sort of confrontation. It seems that Russia was so much patient about what's going on. But how long do you see Russia being that patient not to confront the United States?
It's a
You know,
fundamental question because, you know, I just wrote a piece called The Sanction Shield. And in it, I talk about, the threat of sanctions. And the United States has used sanctions. Initially, I used to believe that sanctions was, when you enacted sanctions, it meant you don't have a policy. We don't know what to do, so sanction them. Buy time while we figure it out. But what we've found out is that over time, the sanctions doesn't weaken the society the way we want it to. The idea was to get the people to hold their government accountable. What we found is, though, that sanctions, especially those that target the political and economic elites who previously enjoyed a good working relationship with the West, with the United States, that these sanctions, if you put the pain on them and then you dangle the prospects of the lifting of sanctions, you've now created leverage in that society. And that was the fatal mistake that Venezuela made. You saw Maduro bend over backwards to try and make arrangements with Chevron. I mean, what Maduro should have done the moment the United States sanctioned it is nationalize the totality of Venezuelan oil, nationalize the totality, and sell Chevron's assets to China for $1 and say, China, you own this now. America, you fucked around, you found out. You came at us, we just obviated you. You don't matter anymore. It is owned by China. And now you force the United States to take a break. But what happened is, no, he went, hey, let's play around. Let's work with Chevron. Let's work with the United States. Let's make deals. Why? Because the United States had hurt a segment of his population, political and economic elites. And instead of confronting those elites and saying, under no circumstances do we deal with the devil, he said, no, let's dance with the devil. Let's play the game on the hopes that the devil's actually playing a real game by the rules and that they'll lift the sanctions and all this wealth will come back in and you guys can get back to the standard of living. Everything will be good. Maduro can dance in the street again and all that kind of stuff. But that's not how the United States plays, because we lure the possibility of, we dangle the possibility of the lifting of sanctions, and then we just slam the door. And then we blame it on Maduro and we say it's his fault. And now the political and economic elites go, hey, Maduro, he's to blame. And the CIA comes in and goes, hey, guys, we can help you out here. You help us get rid of Maduro. And man, we got bank accounts right now with money in it. Here's the bank account. That's your name. There's a lot of money in there. And there'll be more money once the oil starts to flow. All you have to do is play the game. And sadly, Venezuelan traders took the CIA dollar. This is what's happening in Iran, by the way. I just want to make this point very, very clear that the Iranian government, Pezeshkian, I don't condemn the man. I mean, he knows sanctions hurt. Sanctions hurt. And instead of saying, suck it up, Iran, we ain't caving ever. We will make the adjustments necessary, but we will never again work with the West, ever again. Take that off the plate. He went, no. We've got to make good with the West. Shit, that's your mistake, dude, because the second you did that, you created hope in the eyes of certain political and economic elites in Iran that there could be better days ahead if the sanctions are lifted. And then when the United States says, but it's the government of Iran's fault for the sanctions not being lifted, you've created that point of leverage. And now the CIA and other intelligence services, Israel, the Dutch, the British, are in there leveraging this false hope of economic largesse into opposition to remove the government of Iran. The government of Iran is to blame for this, 100%. I mean, I don't condone what's happening, but it's their fault. They created this condition, just like Maduro did. And look, Russia's doing the same thing. Vladimir Putin um, he was given a gift, the gift of sanctions, because the sanctions against Russia are so absolute that Russia created a sanctions shield that basically said that in order for us to survive, we have to live outside any notion of economic interaction with the West. And they created these links, they redid things themselves. But then Kirill Dmitriev came in, and I'm not saying the man is the fifth column, but he is. He's a Goldman Sachs banker who runs the sovereign wealth fund of Russia, a wealth fund that depends upon Western economic methodologies to thrive. The Putin should have shut it down and turned it over to a Russian and said, run it Russian style. We don't want Goldman Sachs bankers anymore. I'm sorry, Kirill, here's your pension. Go pound sand. But instead, Kirill came in and said, hey, we can work with the West here. Why don't we offer them, these economic relationships, exploitation of the Arctic, helping us with oil exploitation in the north, the rare earth minerals, all these things we can do. Once sanctions are lifted, we're cut a deal in Ukraine, but the sanctions will be great. And then he started working with Steve Witkoff, who is Donald Trump's boy, not a diplomacy guy, an economic guy. But Trump never, ever, ever wanted to do any of the things Kirill Dmitriev wants. He's not serious about it. The Russians have committees and organizations that get together and they have plans. The United States has squat. They have Witkoff and Jared Kushner, a Zionist who wants to, turn Gaza into a Mediterranean vacation spot. That's the depth of his analysis. Meeting with Kirill Dmitriev, talking pie in the sky crap. And the problem is, this gets published in Russia, and then Russian political and economic elites go, we want that. We can make money off of this. This would be a good thing. And they start putting pressure on Vladimir Putin to make good with the West. No, you had a shield, a sanctions shield. Never, ever deal with the West, Vladimir Putin. Never. Not now. Not Donald Trump. Donald Trump is a man who lacks honor. No deal with Donald Trump will ever be manifested the way you think it will be. It's a one-way street. The deal is only good so far as Donald Trump personally is enriched by it, politically or economically. And the moment the deal becomes inconvenient, Trump will walk. That's his entire business relationship. Go back to his time as a New York realtor. Go back to his time in Atlantic City with the casino. The man's a living, walking piece of shit who literally uses the rules to make money to his sole benefit. He doesn't care about establishing a viable business. He doesn't care about, mutually beneficial relationships. It's a one-way street. That's it. Donald Trump, one way. And he's now the president of the United States, and he's making the United States behave in this fashion. Vladimir Putin needs to shut Kirill Dmitriev down now. Stop it. And tell everybody in Russia, don't even think about economic relations with the West. That isn't going to happen ever. And if you want it to happen, get the hell out of the country. Leave now. Leave your money here, but get out of here. I'm not dealing with it. Shut it down now. Because if you don't, the United States will find a way. The CIA will always find a way to whisper sweet nothings into the ears of people who are looking for a better way of life. The quick way out, the path to riches. And when that happens, there will be opposition in Russia. And, I'm not saying the Russian government can't control it, but why do you want to open the door to this crap? Shut it down now. But they haven't. And it's a sign of, I don't want to say weakness, but it's a sign of bad thinking. Vladimir Putin is getting bad advice from people. If anybody's telling Vladimir Putin that there's a potential for the spirit of Alaska to manifest itself, there is no potential for the spirit of Alaska. The spirit of Alaska was always a fraud. Never forget this. The person briefing Donald Trump as he was going in for the meeting was a CIA officer, the former national intelligence officer for Russia and Eurasia, who hated Donald Trump, was part of the 2016 effort to undermine Donald Trump, who hates Vladimir Putin, who hates Russia. Do you really think this person was giving Donald Trump realistic analysis about Russia? Or was this person advising Donald Trump on how you can use the Alaska summit to your own benefit? What do you need the Russians to commit to walk away? And it worked. Trump didn't give anything away in Alaska. But what he got from the Russians was a commitment to the spirit of Alaska. And that opened the door for the continued dialogue between Dmitriev and Witkoff, which then creates this notion of the possibility of economic largesse if sanctions could just be lifted. It was a scam the whole time. Donald Trump played Vladimir Putin. And I think it's time for Vladimir Putin to wake up and understand that that's exactly what happened. You got played by Trump, by Witkoff, by Dmitriev. Whether Dmitriev was witting or not, I'm not going to malign the patriotism of Kirill Dmitriev, but he's a Goldman Sachs banker. This is what he does. He makes deals. He doesn't make deals, like you and I make a deal, a handshake deal, where it's based on reality. He deals with massive movements of money that enrich select elites. And that's what he's done. He created the potential for certain elites in Russia to make a whole bunch of money. And we're talking about governors. We're talking about, heads of cities, heads of corporations. All these people are lining up to play this game. And these are people who have political power. And now they're disappointed because the trillions of dollars they thought they were going to make isn't going to be made. And Dmitriev's left holding an empty bag, but so too is Vladimir Putin. Shut it down now, President Putin. Shut it down now. There is no spirit of Alaska. Never was. It was always a scam. And you're being scammed right now. And if you don't believe that, take a look at your frickin' ship just boarded by American pirates in the North Atlantic.
Scott, we had, since Donald Trump came to, was elected in the United States, there were two major escalation between Russia and the West. One of them was in the attack on nuclear bombers before the war between Iran and Israel breaking out. And the second one was the attack before the operation in Venezuela, the attack on Putin's residence. These are huge. Looking at the curve, the attack on bombers right now is major escalation attacking on Putin. And what is going on in the mind of Russian analysts close to Vladimir Putin? How do they realize, how do they understand the situation with the Trump administration? Because we know if something happens to Vladimir Putin, we're going to have a nuclear war. There is no way out. Whoever going to replace him, he's going to bring a nuclear war. He's going to attack London. He's going to attack all these decision makers in Europe. What is your take on that? And how far they want to go?
Well, I mean, this is one of the fundamental discussions. This is why I go to Russia, just so everybody understands, so I can have these conversations and talk to people. I just finished doing a very lengthy interview with Sergei Karaganov. He's a prominent Russian political scientist. He's a man who's very anti Russian interaction with the West. He believes that Russia should pivot to the East and work with China, that there's no future for Russia in the West because the West is an untrustworthy negotiating partner. He's 100% correct. But here's the thing. He believes that the West is bluffing. I mean, he's a prominent believer. He doesn't believe in nuclear disarmament. This is where he and I have clashed in the past because I'm an advocate, or at least I have been. I don't know where I stand today. I'm an advocate for meaningful disarmament. But from the Russian perspective, how could you possibly get involved in meaningful disarmament with an American negotiating partner who's untrustworthy? I mean, because the key to disarmament is the mutual benefit of the pact and the binding nature of the pact. And the United States just can't be trusted at all. And so rather than limit your nuclear force, I mean, if anything, the behavior of the United States promotes the notion of Russia enhancing its nuclear deterrent, expanding its nuclear capabilities. Not the direction I want to go, but I understand it. But Karaganov believes that the United States is bluffing, that the United States will never use nuclear weapons to defend Europe, and that if Europe continues to pose an existential threat to Russia, that Russia should use nuclear weapons against Europe. And he wrote a piece a couple years ago where he said the United States is not willing to trade Boston for Poznan, meaning that Russia can drop a nuke on Poznan and the United States will do nothing. That's a hell of a statement, a hell of a gamble. And this is a man who has sat next to Vladimir Putin. This is a man who participates in the Valdai Club. Um, and people listen to this and they say, "Oh, that's the hardliners advising Vladimir Putin." But I think that we need to understand that Sergei Karaganov is not the government. That the Russian government is actually acting as if they believe that the United States would use nuclear weapons to defend Europe, and that Russia is vulnerable to American nuclear weapons attack. And there's a huge hesitancy inside Russia, a weakness that's being exploited successfully by the United States and Europe. I mean, Russia keeps, publishing red lines that keep getting crossed, and people like myself and others assess and say, well, that's because Vladimir Putin's very pragmatic, and that ultimately he's going to do what needs to be done to get the job done, come hell or high water. And if Europe pushes him, then he could use nuclear weapons. But I think this is up to debate right now. I mean, I haven't made a conclusion. I'm not sitting here calling Vladimir Putin, a flake. I personally believe that he's not, but I do believe that he's being advised by people who, anybody who believes in the spirit of Alaska today should be fired. There is no spirit of Alaska. That is the spirit of submission, the spirit of surrender. And now the Russians need to, reflect on the reality of this rogue nation, the United States, and how do you contain this rogue nation? You don't contain it through friendship. You don't contain it through diplomacy. You contain it through strength. That's the only thing the United States understands is strength. It will act where it senses weakness. And right now, the fact that the United States boarded a Russian flag tanker in an act of piracy means they sense weakness on the part of Russia. And they will continue to push as long as they perceive weakness. Russia, at some point in time, needs to have a demonstration of strength. And sadly, this probably means some sort of military conflict with the United States, hopefully contained. But again, you committed an act of piracy against a Russian ship. The penalty for pirates is usually being sunk. I'm not promoting that. I'm an American. I don't want any harm to come to Americans. But my God, the Coast Guard just committed an act of piracy. It's time for Russia to draw a line and say, no more. You've gone as far as you're going to go. From here on in, if you take an action, there will be a Russian military response, and we're willing to take it as far as you want to go. I mean, if you'd like me, I can put my entire strategic nuclear force on, combat alert, if you want to play that game. Right now, the United States believes that Russia will never do this, that Russia has no intention of doing this. Russia can't do it. And so the United States is going to push and push and push. And you have insane people like Pete Hegseth, who just thinks that, my God, because we put 200 JSOC personnel in the Caracas, we can do anything. Now we put some JSOC people on board a Russian tanker. We can do anything. And you have people like Scott Besson who actually believe that we can sanction Russia into collapse. And that's what he is doing. Trump has not embraced a policy of lifting sanctions on Russia. Trump has embraced a policy of sanctioning Russia into collapse. That is the policy of the Trump administration. Russia needs to wake up to this, and that is, in fact, the policy. We aren't looking for a way out of Ukraine. We're looking to defeat Russia strategically in Ukraine, and we're doing that by dragging this conflict out. And blaming this on Putin, saying the sanctions can't be lifted because of this in hopes of generating a fifth column inside Russia for that purpose. What does Vladimir Putin have to think about today? Let's look back on this now. The drone attack against Russian strategic nuclear bombers was an attack that was carried out by the Central Intelligence Agency together with MI6. The CIA has been working with Ukrainian intelligence since 2015 to develop resources inside Russia for these very kinds of attack. To carry out an attack like this, it requires, the ability to identify facilities of interest, to be able to rent them, operate them under the radar, to acquire vehicles. Look, it's called advanced force operations. You're in Iran right now. You do know what we did in Iran before the failed hostage rescue attempt. We sent in a special operations team covertly. Dick Meadows led it. They rented warehouses. They rented trucks. They rented safe houses. And they drove these trucks around. They did reconnaissance. And basically, Delta Force was supposed to take helicopters, land outside of Tehran. The trucks were to meet Delta Force, and the Delta Force would be trucked in on Iranian trucks to the embassy, to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, where they would launch their assault. And then the helicopters would come in, lift them out, take them to an airfield that would be seized by the Rangers, etc. But we had people on the ground in Iran doing this. Fred, I can't remember, Arouge, I think his last name was. He was an Air Force junior enlisted man at the time, Iranian, Persian speaker. He was with them as a linguist. He got left behind. I mean, when the thing went bad, he got left behind. And Fred had to make his way out on his own. He made it to Turkey, but, if he got caught, death. I later met Fred. Fred became a helicopter pilot for Task Force 160 for U.S. Army Special Operations Forces, and he flew missions with me in Iraq as a weapons inspector. But the point is, this is what we do. This is how we operate. The CIA and the British understand, again, the decade of 1990s, we bought everybody, especially the British. The British went out and bought everybody, and they put them on the payroll. And there is a significant system in place in Russia today that the CIA controls. These are safe houses. These are the ability to generate income if necessary under the radar. So you don't have infusions of capital that can be traced. You have people working, earning money, banking that money. So it's there in the system. So when you rent a warehouse, you're not receiving $10,000 from outside that's then used to rent away and raising a red flag. You're just another business person renting a warehouse. And that's what they did. And then they built a drone production factory. And next thing you know, they launched this attack against Russian strategic. This was a test of Russia, because Russia had published, a strategic nuclear doctrine that said if you attack our nuclear infrastructure, we're going to huff and puff and blow your house down. And Russia did jack shit. Russia went, oh, okay, we're going to shrug it off as a non-event. It was a test. Now, apparently, Donald Trump calls up Vladimir Putin, gets a phone conversation with him, and then says, hey, hang on, I'll call you back. and then authorizes a drone attack that could only have taken place with the CIA and support. And at the same time, just so you understand, we were hoping something would happen, because the CIA had already worked with the New York Times and Wall Street Journal weeks in advance to prepare a story published that day. Guys, you do understand that didn't happen by accident. The New York Times published a piece that was based upon the CIA giving away deep, dark secrets about how they operate and what they're doing in Ukraine. And they published it the same day because it was supposed to be the CIA's plan, got Putin or scared Putin or make Putin run, but it's something that's been going on a long time. Instead, they had to modify, saying, but we've been doing this. Vladimir Putin was targeted by Donald Trump. There's no other way to spin this. No other way to spin this. Donald Trump targeted Vladimir Putin. Maybe not with the intent to kill, because, Trump's like, well, we didn't target his residence, just a facility nearby. So what signal were you trying to send, Donald, to strike a facility nearby? that I can get you anytime I want to, and therefore you need to piss your pants every time America says jump. You need to say how high, Mr. President. Caligula, what do you want me to do? That was the signal he's trying to send to Putin. Now, apparently the Russians were smarter and they caught him out. And the Russians know this is the thing. The Russians turned over a chip to the defense attaches that has data on it that proves that they were targeting Vladimir Putin, and it proves who was providing the intelligence. I mean, I could spend a long time telling you how this gets reverse engineered. The Russians handed over an intact chip, and they just said, we'd like you to take a look at it. But what the Russians are really saying is, we know everything. We know everything. We know what you did. All right, so now they sent that signal, but unless that's backed up with something, it's meaningless, because Trump's, this cult of personality is surrounded by nothing but yes men. Ha ha ha, Mr. President, we almost got him. Good job, Mr. President. You sure showed him a thing or two. The CIA's patting itself on the back, headset saying, see how strong we are. Rubio's like, yeah, I'm not afraid of Russia, and all this stuff. You have to respect Vladimir Putin because he is a sober leader, a sober-minded leader, a pragmatic leader, but he's dealing with a madman, a literal madman, who right now there are no checks and balances to the actions of this madman. Again, I'm not here to advise the president of Russia, but I am here to tell him as an expert analyst, you're being played like a fool by the president of the United States. I hope you understand that, you accept it, and you take appropriate actions. But if you believe for a second that there's the spirit of Alaska, if you believe for a second that this is just the bad influences on Trump, that Steve Witkoff can appeal to the better side, Witkoff is part of the problem. He's not part of the solution. Witkoff is empowering a fifth column inside Russia that's designed to take you down, Mr. President. You've been warned.
Scott, you've been to Russia. How did you find the differences in this part of society? You've just mentioned a little bit of what's going on in Russia and Witkoff, the role of Witkoff and his team to somehow make differences within the society. But how influential that could be for a Russian president? I'm talking about internally, inside Russia.
How could this be weaponized against Putin?
Yeah, exactly. How is that possible to weaponize that against Vladimir Putin? Because we know the system. The system is so.
Let's say you're the governor of Novosibirsk Oblast region, your most powerful economic engine in Russia, and this opportunity that Witkoff is dangling out there, that Dmitry is dangling out there, has the potential of giving you the ability to control contracts, control development. And suddenly you're looking at your future going, man, Vladimir Putin is, 70 some odd years old. I'm 40s. I could be the next president of Russia. I could become the economic engine of Russia. I could be the guy that Putin turns to, and I could be the next president. And so I'm all excited about this. And now you've planted that thought in his head that he's relevant, that he's somebody, and begins talking to people, other people, including the FSB, the local FSB. They use them then to silence opposition, which they're doing right now. And it's not just Novosibirsk, but it's others. The second you start talking about the development of Russian resources, the governors, the local government of the regions that have those resources have a vested interest in this possibility, because a lot of that potential is dormant right now because Russia lacks the capacity to act on its development. If you're running the economy and you're saying, gosh, if we continue this war, we're going to have to transition to a war economy at some point in time. And that's going to impact markets that I've been making money off of, that all my friends are making money off of. It's going to require a tightening of the belt that's going to cause me to be diminished, because right now I have a lot of influence because I'm the money person. I can make money happen, and suddenly I'm not anymore. All these people now start talking to each other. And, what happens is that, Vladimir Putin starts finding out that there's a shadow government. There's people conspiring behind his back, that maybe instructions he's given aren't being carried out to the full effect. Maybe the military starts questioning, his guidance, his leadership. This isn't happening now. I don't believe. I think Vladimir Putin still, has tremendous support. But this is what could happen. This is what the CIA is trying to make happen. It's been what the CIA has been trying to do ever since Vladimir Putin came into office. And they were successful with Navalny, Nemtsov. All these people were all CIA assets, bought and paid for. But the Russians, through their foreign agent law, was able to shut down vectors of control, non-governmental organizations. So the only thing that's left in Russia today are these long-term assets that have been, that were bought back in the 90s by the CIA and MI6 that can be activated as necessary. But now you've created new potential, because if you're, just think about it, you're Kirill Dmitriev, and Vladimir Putin has tapped you now to be the guy interfacing with Witkoff. So you have a meeting, you meet in the Kremlin. Putin's like, yeah, this is good. So Dmitriev now meets with Russians and says, the spirit of Alaska is real. Let's talk about so next time Dmitriev comes in, we have a plan of action for the Arctic that we could put on the table to lure America in. And so now he goes up to the Arctic and gets all these people to plan. And once you start planning, it's like anything. You start planning a vacation, you start seeing the vacation in your mind. I'm already on the beach in Hawaii. I'm already playing golf. I'm already, and then suddenly be told, no, you're not going on vacation. It's like a big disappointment. I want to go on vacation. I planned the vacation. I'm spending that money as we speak. And that's what's happening. He creates these commissions, these planning groups that start planning the future of Russia. I mean, the whole stupid tunnel thing, there's not going to be a tunnel. It's never going to happen. But Dmitriev's like, we're going to have this Siberian-Alaskan tunnel. No, you're not. And if you ever did, it's not to bring American wealth into Russia. It's to suck Russian resources out of Russia, because that's the only thing the United States understands. We don't care about Russia. We don't care about Russia. We don't care about Russia. We don't care about Russian companies. We don't care about the Russian bottom line. We don't care about anything about Russia. All we want is Russian resources coming to America on terms that are acceptable to us. That's what it's all about. That's what the spirit of Alaska is. But even then it's a lie, because that implies that we want some sort of legitimate economic interaction between the United States and Russia. We don't. We want to use the promise of legitimate economic interaction to create a fifth column to achieve our ultimate objective. And again, I'm just saying this as loud as I can. The United States has been seeking to remove Vladimir Putin from office since the moment Vladimir Putin became president. It's a 25-year process in place. Come on, guys. Joe Biden went to Moscow in March of 2011 and told the Russian people, the opposition, straight up, it's not a good idea for Vladimir Putin to come back and be president of the United States. That's not a good idea. It's not good for Putin. It's not good for Russia. Could you imagine Dmitry Medvedev coming to the United States, and having a meeting in New York City with a bunch of bankers and stuff? Hey, it's not a good idea for J.D. Vance to run for president. Not a good idea. Not good for J.D. And not good for America. We think that the person that should be the person we pick. Our person. Americans would go, "Are you high? Get out of here." But Joe Biden did it in broad daylight, because that's what we were doing. We were undermining Russia. We've been undermining him forever. We don't like Vladimir Putin. We don't want to work with Vladimir Putin. Vladimir Putin represents everything that we hate. You see, we were happy in the 1990s when Russia was on its knees crawling to us for crumbs. Oh, that made us so happy. And then Vladimir Putin taught Russia to stand up. We're like, whoa, what are you doing? Russia's not allowed to stand up. We won the Cold War. Get back down on your knees, Russia. Behave, heal. And Russia went, no, we're going to stand up. And then Putin taught them to love themselves, because there was a period of time in the 90s where Russia stopped loving itself. Russia went, oh, we're so bad. We're so inferior. We have to do what the West tells us to do. We have to be like the West. We want to be like the West. We want all the West stuff. Make us like the West. Please, we'll do anything to be like the West. But now Putin went, hey, Russia's one of the great civilizations. Why don't you start being proud of being Russian? And the Russians looked around and went, yeah, we're pretty cool. And today the Russians are standing on their 2 feet, fully exercised, very proud of who they are. And we don't want this. We don't want to deal with Russia that is Russia. We want Russia to be defeated, supine, compliant, weak. We can't handle a Russia that stands on its own 2 feet and says we're proud of who we are, because the biggest threat Russia poses now is the fact that they don't want to be like us, because that's how we control the world. That's how American hegemony works. We convince the relevant societies that you're inferior, that the only way that you can get a seat at the table is to be like us. We did it in Iran. We're doing it in Iran. Come on, guys. All those fancy Western stores. Come on, Iranian women, because we know who runs Iran. It's the women, just like they run everything in the world. And you can get that nice dress, and you can wear this nice makeup at home, and you can do this, that, and the other thing. We can take you to London so you can go shopping and all that stuff. Just tell your husband, hey, those Ayatollahs, they got to go. And then the wife whispers in your, honey, the Ayatollah's got to go. And then you get demonstration in the streets. That's a simplistic, comedic thing, but that's how it works. We play to the base desires of people. And instead of Iranian women waking up every morning going, I'm proud of being Iranian. I'm proud of my religion. I'm proud of my culture. I stand on my own 2 feet as a proud representative of Iranian society. See, that's what the West doesn't want. We want Iranian women going, oh, I want to be like those ladies in London. I want to be like those ladies in Paris. I want to go to New York because Iran sucks. No, same thing in Russia. We don't want the Russians looking around going, I'm proud of Russia. I'm proud of being a Russian. I think Russia's great. We want Russians to go, oh, Russia sucks. We want to be like the West. We need American help. We need America to send in their advisors like they did in the 1990s so that our society collapses. This is the goal and objective of the United States government. It's not just what Trump wants. Trump just happens to have a bunch of maniacs in power now who believe they can actually follow through on this. But it's been what the United States has wanted for 25 years. And Vladimir Putin has to wake up to this reality. Look, I have to wake up to this reality. I'm the guy that just spent the last 2.5 years traveling to Russia promoting U.S.-Russian friendship. What a load of shit I was selling. Oh, America wants to be your friend. No, we don't, apparently. And as long as the American public is infected by Russophobia, you can't trust the American people. There's individuals like myself and others who believe in this, but we're informed individuals. But until you break through the Russophobic hold on how Americans receive their information through academia, through the mainstream media, through government propaganda, the American people are infected. I mean, the stupidity I read in your chat and every other chat, I don't blame just you. The stupidity of the people in here who know nothing of Russia but act as if they do because they read a tweet by by Steve Witkoff or something. They're dumber than shit. To know Russia, you have to go to Russia. If you haven't been to Russia, if you haven't, dived into that, you don't know shit about Russia. So stop pretending you do. But this is the problem. America is controlled by ignorant people. It's sustained by the minds of ignorant people who think they know something and they know nothing whatsoever. And as long as this system exists, why should Russia be friends with us? I mean, Russia should always hold the door open and say, if you want to accept Russia on Russian terms, Russia will be your friend. But I think the day of Russia waiting for the West to come on over is over. Shut the damn door. Make us knock. Don't hold the door open for us. Shut the door. Seal yourselves off. We're your enemy. And most people are trying to destroy you. They act, in regards to Russia, not out of, a desire for friendship, but desire to use friendship as a means of leveraging poisonous systems inside your society to bring it down. That's a sad statement, but it's the truth under the Trump administration. Whether we can change that, I don't know. But I'm very depressed right now because I just spent a lot of time traveling to Russia promoting the concept of U.S. Russian relations. And I'm an honest person. I honestly believed in that. I honestly believed in that. I believed in that when I was there in November, although it was becoming harder and harder to do that. But today, after what my government has done, at the way the American people are responding to the actions of my government, America doesn't want to be friends with Russia. We don't know how to be friends with Russia. All we want to do is destroy Russia. And Russia needs to understand that and wake up to that reality.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much, Scott, for being with us today. Great pleasure as always. We always learn
Yeah.
from your understanding of what's going on in Ukraine. And basically, today we were focused on Venezuela, then Russia. In my opinion, it's all related. But after all, we are so pleased to have you on, and thank you so much.
Well, thank you, and stay safe in Iran. Have fun, and
Thank
I'll talk to you soon.
Talk to you soon. Yeah, we're gonna have Pepe Escobar joining us right now. I'm gonna send a message to him to join us. Let me just, yeah, let me just remove this. Yeah, I'm trying to, yeah, to tell Pepe to come up. Yeah, send a message to him. Yeah, he's gonna come up right now. And today with Pepe, we know what's going on in the Latin America with the case of Venezuela. It's so sad. It's so tragic because I saw what has happened to Iran, to the Middle East, to the West Asia by these endless wars in the region, in Iraq and Afghanistan, Syria right now. And it's so sad to see it's coming to Brazil, to Latin America. And it's not just about Brazil. They're talking about Cuba, as you know. They're talking about, you know, it's all about they say it's left. It's all not. It's not about the left and right. It's something beyond that. When they're talking about Venezuela, Cuba, Colombia, and I would say it comes to Brazil, yeah, in the future, and we're gonna dig into that with Pepe Escobar, and yeah, here is Pepe joining us. How's everything, Pepe? We are on live.
Hi, Nima. Hi, everybody. In fact, it's my turn to ask you because you are in the eye of the hurricane. You are in Tehran.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
am in NATO. I am at my alcove, my hermit's nest in NATO stan, relatively protected. But you are in the line of fire. We're gonna have to talk
yeah,
about that, Nima.
yeah. Exactly. We're gonna talk about it. But let's start, Pepe. You and I have something in common, which is Brazil. It's in our hearts, and the Latin America is of particular importance for both of us. And considering what has happened in Venezuela, Pepe, it's so sad. It's so sad when what has happened in Venezuela. What is the outcome of the actions of the Trump administration? What is the repercussions of these sort of actions for the Latin America countries? I'm talking about Brazil, Colombia, Cuba, and all of these countries. Europe.
Yes. I talked about that in a previous podcast, and if I do others this week, will be the same thing. I'm going to probably talk to the Chinese this week. I'm going to be stressing the number one theme in terms of Latin America and South America. The streets of South America, Nima, and all of you, our audience, and the streets of Latin America are united. Resistance. No pasarán. The elites of Latin America, it's a completely different story, especially the fifth columnist comprador elites in Venezuela. But, this is, I would say, two or three neighborhoods in Caracas, because most of them are exiled mostly in Florida. Miami is the capital of the Venezuelan diaspora, as we all know. So the elites in Brazil, which are one of the most disgusting in every aspect ever, and I know these people from the inside. I grew up with them. I know how they think. I know how they hate Brazil. I know how they sell Brazil like, they could sell. Okay, let's not get into it. And of course, and their idea of success is what else? A house in Florida and an apartment in Nova York, New York City, with a Carioca accent. Uh, the elites in Colombia, the elites in Chile, which are beyond the elites in Chile. You go to certain neighborhoods in Santiago, there are only Nazi fascists around you, ostensibly, very, very wealthy. Buenos Aires, oh my God, that's even worse. And now they run the country completely via their Sierra Electrica stooge, Millet. So these elites, of course, they are applauding what happened. This Netflix, uh, I would say this Netflix trailer with no season two that happened in Caracas. By the way, I don't know if I posted on my Telegram, all of you should see it. There is already I would say less than 2 minute artificial intelligence rendering of what happened in Caracas, following the American script and done by a Venezuelan filmmaker. So he bought the American narrative completely. But the AI production, the production values are excellent. And this, for young people all over the world, this is very dangerous because this is subliminal psyops already. This is going to be the version for young people hooked on AI that's going to start circulating everywhere. And conceptually, it's totally false, although it's brilliantly presented and it looks gorgeous. But it's total bullshit. It's basically a press release from the White House put on AI. Okay, so that's the major difference, Nima and all of you. And keep it very, very clear. All of you who are watching us that are from South America or Latin America, speak Spanish or Portuguese, and all of you, maybe many more of you, who are not in South America, Latin America, who have, I would say, marginal exposure to life in South America and in Latin America, not only these past few years, but in the past few decades. This dichotomy between the working classes, the campesinos, the popular few all across Latin America, and their absolutely disgusting elites. It's one of the most graphic abysses in the history of humanity, really. And I'm not being hyperbolic here. So obviously, this 1% in South America and Latin America, for them, this is a godsend because their model, whoever is in power in Washington, is the empire. They are the lackeys of the empire. They are the picked millimetrically by the empire, trustworthy comprador elites. You live in Brazil, Nima. You know very well what kind of people I'm talking about in Brazil. The old money in Brazil, like, the what 50, 60 families, old money in Brazil, especially for the past 200 years. Most of them concentrated in the south, but there are some in the northeast as well. And of course, the old money, the extreme right, evangelical, agribusiness kind, bling bling kind of money, which every time that I go back to the city where I was born in Sao Paulo, And I go to some of my favorite places, and these people are invading some of the old places, but they go to their own places, which are disgusting. And if they are not, they make it disgusting by their bling bling ostentation. So this is life in South America and Latin America very well, and you know it, Nima. This total abyss, and obviously they never intersect. They only intersect when there's some high-profile kidnapping uh, or assault at gunpoint in Rio or São Paulo, especially, and then the clash hits the headlines, right? But this just looking the first 72 hours, the reaction, the popular reaction all across not only the streets of Caracas and the streets of Venezuela, in the countryside of Venezuela as well, but in Colombia, in Peru, in Brazil, in Uruguay. uh, this I am defining him now as the Neo Caligula, which is an easy, I would say it's an easy way for people to understand what we're talking about. This new Caligula mini Netflix operation managed to unite popular opinion all across Latin America. And it's great that the images that we are seeing, not only in Caracas, the official images, like they'll see now the president saluting. The first ones to be saluted, who were they? The ambassadors of Russia, China, and Iran. And these images, don't forget, they go all across Venezuela and beyond, via Telesur, beyond many countries in South America as well. The fact that we have images of Delcy presiding, let's say the new Security Council of Venezuela, with the Minister of Defense on one side, the Minister of Interior on one side, and basically are saying, we are resisting. They're saying in images, no pasarán. That's it. We are resisting. And it's no wonder that the circus ringmaster, aka Neo Caligula, already proclaimed that if Delcy doesn't do what she's told, I'm going to bomb Venezuela again. Uh, we are not joking. This is what he says. And if you saw his performance yesterday, which was broadcast live a little bit everywhere, and it's everywhere around the net, you know, we are dealing with a profoundly deranged individual, a megalomaniacal narcissist, totally out of control. In many aspects, Nima and all of you, this operation was for his own ego, regardless of any geopolitical, geoeconomic, diplomatic, humanitarian consequences, not to mention breaking international law. Because this character never thinks in terms of constraints, common sense, respect for the other, whoever the other is. He only thinks megalomaniacally about himself, his image reflected in a swampy pool where he's staring at his own image nonstop until he drowns. And he's drowning over and over again. And this is just the beginning of the latest drowning. The ramifications of, for the first time, the United States bombing a South American capital. That's a first. The United States kidnapping the head of a sitting government in the global South, not only South America, Latin America, the global South. That's already a first. So, the repercussions are going to be very, very long term. We're just in the beginning. The train has not even left the station, Nima. We're still at the station because we're still at the station and we're looking around and say, okay, what time the train is going to leave? Okay, so before the train leaves, let's take a look at if we did everything we need to do, if our luggage is on board, etc. So now we have some.
Yeah, it seems that we've lost Pepe. He's going to join us again. And it was some sort of problem with his connection, I assume. Let me Just contact him. Yeah, he's coming. Yeah, you're back, Pepe.
Yes, I got a weird message saying that I needed to reload the site. That's really,
Why?
really weird. I
Yeah.
didn't do anything, and this message came, and our communication was cut off. So, okay, sorry, guys. Once again, we are victims here.
We know who's doing this.
Exactly, know who's doing this, especially because this is a communication between Littlestan and Iran. So, um, okay, so we know more or less how the whole thing developed, and that is something extremely problematic. We know the names of some of the people who actually betrayed Maduro. Uh, we knew from the beginning there were from our Venezuelan context that there were people from his security detail. But one of them was now identified by the DLC interim government, uh, General Tabata. This guy is a director of military counterintelligence. So this is up there as well. So, yes, CIA money, as it does everywhere. We saw many examples in Afghanistan, in Libya, in Iraq, you name it, in Syria, and it's a lot of money. So they can buy anybody they want virtually. So it was not only this close circle of the security detail, it went much, much higher. So the good thing is that the DLC government is implicated in uncovering everybody, wherever it may go. Um Once again, the initial hardcore campaign to discredit Delcy from the beginning now has completely floundered. Delcy is a mega Chavista. Her father was a revolutionary killed by the Americans. So Delcy will never betray Venezuela. The two top figures on her side, that's a much more complicated. Padrinho, the minister of defense, and Diosdado Cabello, the Minister of Interior. There are still doubts about what did they know and if they knew anything, what did they facilitate. This is still not clear. For the moment, that gives us an idea of cohesion at the top of the new interim government. Russia, China, and India are not intimidated. Very, very important. All this tsunami of stupidity on the internet saying that China and Russia didn't do anything to save Venezuela. These are people who not only don't know Venezuela, but most of all don't know shit about Russia and China. Not to mention the Russia-China strategic partnership. So the Russian reaction will take time, and the Chinese reaction is going to also take time, and it's going to be extremely legalistic. Whatever this Trump 2.0 administration, whatever they do to try to block contracted oil, especially from Venezuela, to go to China, China will react in courts of law. China will sue the hell out of the Trump administration. So they better think twice or three times and bring their battery of lawyers from New York firms to advise them of that, because this is going to be very, very ugly. Apart from that, it's something that I've been discussing with some of our colleagues this past few days. The absolutely delightful scenario, once again, let me stress to all of you, this is a very plausible scenario, is that this is part of a very elaborate, sophisticated trap laid out by Russia and China to catch the narcissistic, megalomaniac Neo Caligula. If that is the case, of course, we don't have any smoking gun evidence about that, but we have some inklings here and there that this would be quite possible. They knew that that would happen eventually. They advised the Venezuelans on how to deal with it without provoking a war in Venezuelan soil that they could not possibly win, or a shock and awe much worse than the initial shock and awe that we saw a few days ago. It was a mini shock and awe. It had all the ingredients: a blackout, a cyber attack, a very complex cyber attack, a total blackout. So, in the dead of night with no lights, those helicopters could come, and of course, obliteration, at least partially, of Venezuelan defenses. So, until we know to which degree of the military leadership this goes, we won't be able to explain the whole scenario. But this government is already advancing on it. That's an extremely important point. On what happened today, I spent most of the day, Nima, glued on the Bella Marinera saga. And this is an absolutely horrible escalation and
Exactly.
premeditated. Premeditated because they could have boarded this ship while the ship was still in the Caribbean. Why would they wait for the ship to get close to Iceland, in fact, in the North Atlantic, to do it? With all this fanfare, so we can have the secretary of the Forever Wars going live saying this is another victory for the best navy in the history of the universe. The usual bullshit, right? So everybody now is waiting. Okay, what is Russia going to do? Because the submarine and the Russian vessels didn't get there on time. So now the ball is in Russia's court. Knowing how Vladimir Putin thinks, obviously there's not going to be anything drastic. There's going to be a response, Nima, but it's going to be asymmetric and long term. There's no question about that. Because this is a pattern. And the pattern, we have three top uh, uh, developments happening in a matter of days. Number one, the 91 drone attack on the Novgorod command center for nuclear forces, which is also one of President Putin's residence. As we all know by now, the American military attaché was called to the Ministry of Defense in Moscow, and he was handed evidence that the Americans were behind this attack in terms of intel, mapping, satellite imaging 24/7, you name it. So we assume that by now this is not only in the Pentagon's desk, but also on Trump's desk. Number one. Number two, the Netflix 30-minute operation to kidnap Maduro, totally illegal in every aspect you can imagine. And number three, what happened today to the Bella, which changed their flags, start sailing with a Russian flag, and is now apprehended as a Russian vessel, not an Iranian, Venezuelan, or whatever. Uh, the vessel left Iran, went to Venezuela, and when it was leaving Venezuela, started to be it was on hot pursuit by the Americans. So, all that acronym of stupidity following it, including the National Guard, whatever. Okay, so now we have a Russian flagged vessel captured in international waters, neutral in the North Atlantic. So, how Russia is going to deal with that? So, when we put these three together, what does that tell you? You don't need to be our great friend Alistair Crook, who was probably the first one who decoded what was happening even before Maduro was kidnapped. That what happened in Novgorod, that was a game changer. And especially because the Russians immediately put the whole thing together and collected the necessary evidence. And Alistair was the first. I remember doing a post on X a few days ago. Basically, it was a very quick post. I was saying, for all practical purposes, the US Russia negotiations now are dead. Alistair, when he talked to Judge Knapp yesterday, if I'm not mistaken, he provided all the details of how this thing developed, and he came to the same conclusion. I would suspect that most of us independent analysts are coming to the same conclusion. These negotiations, for all practical purposes, from the beginning we were talking about a kabuki, and now the kabuki is revealed. They are dead. The thing is how Russia is going to proceed from now on, knowing that everything that is discussed by Kirill Dmitriev with his Pauls, Witkoff, and Jared Kushner is bullshit. It's nonsense. It won't go anywhere. So, this is a very, very serious development because, in terms of trust, after what happened in Novgorod, after this attack on a very close Russian ally. And after what happened today in the North Atlantic waters, what is there to talk about? What measure of trust can you establish after that? It's absolutely impossible. So once again, the Taoist patience of Vladimir Putin, Sergei Lavrov, and everybody else is going to be tested because you need to respond to all these three in a manner that sends a message to Washington that, look, we know exactly what you're doing. Your game is crystal clear. So okay, so this is when we're going to give you a, let's say, a sample of what could happen if you continue to behave this way, and that fits into the asymmetrical Russian response, which is probably not going to be in the next few hours or even days. And of course, brings back to what we were already discussing until a few days ago, which is the Lavrov, I would say the Lavrov mantra. The SMO will be decided in the battlefield. That's it. There's no other solution. The capitulation of not only Kiev, but the Europeans and NATO, and obviously ultimately of the empire, will be decided in the battlefield, period. So we enter another stage of the SMO now. It's SMO, counter-terrorist operation, and with no end in sight. This war is not going to finish in 2026. It's more than obvious. It will go on. Can go on for at least another 3 years or even more. So we are back in a extremely volatile, incandescent territory because of these American actions. And obviously, this once again makes it very clear for all of us that those who really control the machinery of government and of state in the US, the people in the back, the people who run the show, the people who actually ordering Trump to do this and that, or ordering their silos in the industrial military complex, in the CIA, in the intel agencies, in the Security Council, in media, academia, think tanks, etc. This is the propaganda spin that you have to put out, and these are the actions that you have to follow. It hasn't changed substantially, and it won't change. And now with the new national security strategy, which is basically a mask of we are retreating from some areas around the world because we cannot exercise our hegemony. Bullshit. What this NSS is saying is we are going to enforce our hegemony, privileging two areas, of course, but we'll continue to try to exercise our hegemony everywhere around the planet. So, this is the lesson of the NSS. The first lesson that we had a few days ago was the implementation of the corollary to the Monroe Doctrine. That's what's written in the NSS in Venezuela. So we have the system as a whole, not only Trump, his Secretary of Forever Wars, the Gusano Marco Rubio, the pathetic Gusano Marco Rubio, everybody, apart from a few dissidents in the media. Yes, this is our hemisphere. And these people are so blatant and brash that they issue a poster, uh, Department of State poster everywhere. This is our hemisphere with the figure of the President of the United States. They don't even need to disguise it anymore. So that comes back to the beginning of your question, Nima. How this is going to be viewed by the popular streets all across Latin America? This is going to be something to watch. You know, and obviously, the elites, the comprador elites in all these Latin American countries, they better they better buy their one-way ticket now, because sooner or later, if this continues like this, people are going to be beyond pissed with everything. Even though they live very precarious lives, they have to fight for subsistence, they have meager salaries, they are, worried about losing their job, and then the next day they'll be in the middle of the road. It doesn't matter, because now this is an aggression against the whole hemisphere. So the response of the southern hemisphere is, this is our hemisphere, the southern hemisphere. You stay over there in North America and do whatever you want. You want to annex Greenland, we don't give a fuck. But here, Latin America, South America, this is our land, and you're going to have to kill us all if you want to take over. Which brings us to, is Trump going to control Venezuela? Never. To do that, he will have to kill 28 million people. Can he do that? No, he can't. So that's it. Trump doesn't control shit in Venezuela, and he won't. And even his CEOs of his own energy companies are saying, there's nothing we can do. It's going to take. These people are not dumb. They read reports with numbers, with examinations on site everywhere. It would take us more or less 10 years, and it would cost, one of the numbers that I saw these past few days, $185 billion at least for 10 years to have Venezuela back to what they were producing a few years ago, which producing and exporting, which is around 3 million barrels of oil a day, which is nothing. So, are they going to invest a lot of money in a chaotic situation? Because if we have a government that cannot govern Venezuela, and the only government that can govern Venezuela is a Chavista government, nobody else can. If we don't have that, we have chaos. If we have chaos, we're going to have CEOs of big multinationals going to invest in this country? Obviously not. Even those less than zero IQ idiots in the CIA, they should know that. Which proves us once again, Nima and all of you, that there was never any strategic planning involved in this lawless kidnapping. It was just an ego operation to placate his master's voice. So he can go on TV and said, we have the best, they did it in 30 minutes. Those Russian defenses, they and do that kind of shtick that he does like a cheap snake oil salesman. So, okay, let's say this is the introduction to our conversation, Nima. But I try to put all the teams together because they all interconnect in the sense that not only this is, from a geostrategic point of view, absolutely stupid, not to mention illegal, but it makes no sense. And it makes no sense for the so called American interests. How do you advance American interests when you are antagonizing not only the whole country that you were attacking, but a whole continent? It doesn't get more stupid than that.
I think we have to consider domestic policy in the United States as well. With the case of Epstein file and midterm elections, which are of great importance for the Trump administration. They are trying to do everything to show that this administration is so powerful.
Mhm.
Nobody can confront this administration. They want, the midterm election to be on their side. They want to win. But Pepe, how you've mentioned the national security strategy of the United States. We know when it came out, we were talking about this is the policy of the current administration. It doesn't go that far to the establishment. But you see the reaction of Europe in, considering what has happened in Venezuela. They're so silent. They I don't they're afraid of making any sort of comments
Of course,
condemning
they
what
are
has
afraid
happened.
to death, and
And
it's even worse.
how would they be, how do they expect that anybody would react to if Donald Trump decides to capture, Greenland?
It's
Who's
already
gonna
decided, Nima. It's already decided, and it's being openly spilled out everywhere, not only by Trump himself, but by senators, by every idiot in the media, you name it. Greenland is next. There's no question about that. We don't know about Iran. I'm going to ask you about Iran at the end of our conversation. But before we get to Iran, Greenland is next. Trump already gave a deadline, 2 months. What those Oh my God, how can I define them? I like Denmark. I've been to Denmark a few times. The people are wonderful. The country is beautiful. But in geopolitical terms, they are less than zero. And by themselves, without NATO, even less than zero. What are they going to do? They're going to send a dog sled with a cocktail Molotov against the White House. No, it's a joke. So the Europeans themselves are already preparing the terrain for the abject performance they're going to have collectively when Trump says, look, that's it. The 2 months are over. Now I'm going to annex Greenland. That's it. He even talked about the possible use of military power, and this could get completely out of hand. But let's assume that CIA money does the deal. They go to Greenland and they buy the whole population and they annex Greenland. What is the EU going to do? Absolutely nothing. They're going to say, oh, wonderful. At least you did it without any loss of life. It's a joke. They are already a joke. They are already in geopolitical terms all over the world. They are the laughing stock of anybody from Nigeria to Java. And now, something that happened between yesterday and today. Correct me the date, Nima, and many of you. They had a declaration signed by five or six, if I'm not mistaken, the coalition of the willing, but basically France and Britain, that they want the US to authorize European troops to be placed in Ukraine in case of a ceasefire. Look, look, it doesn't get more surrealist than that. So these people who are going to lose the territory of one of their members soon, because the Americans are going to go there and grab Greenland, they're asking permission for the grabber of Greenland. Oh, please, can we have our troops in? If you make a deal with, and we can have our troops in Ukraine. How can you possibly treat these people seriously? Obviously not. So, in terms of geopolitics in this raging 20s decade, we can say that the EU is already dead. There's no question. They buried themselves. The next one will be NATO, obviously, because without direct US implication in NATO, NATO doesn't exist. NATO collapses in a matter of days. So, NATO is next. So, this is where we're going. But at the same time, Nima, in terms of NATO, it's much more perverse, the narrative. Because as much as Trump is trying to give the impression that he is disengaging from NATO, no. The industrial military complex will keep fueling NATO in their forever war against Russia. This is not going to change at all. So we're not talking about individual EU members or the EU as a whole. The United States doesn't care about the EU because they know that the EU is not it's chihuahuas, but toothless chihuahuas, even worse. They cannot even do yap yap properly, So they don't care. NATO is a different story. So, as a means of pressure against Russia, fueling NATO with weapons, paid, of course, by EU money, which will be EU taxpayers' money, essentially, paid in euros to the industrial military complex, and then these weapons go to Europe to be used by Ukraine or by NATO against Russia. This will continue because this is, of course, this process is the same process that prevented the war in Afghanistan to end because everybody was making money out of it. Very simple. Apart, of course, from the drug business. And by the way, in terms of drug business, the only drug business, I'm sure all of you noticed that the drug narrative simply disappeared completely from the narrative. It doesn't exist anymore. It's like it never existed. First of all, because can you imagine the Department of Justice themselves, they are forced to go public to say, look, this thing, Cartel de los Soles, never existed. Everybody knew that. Everybody who follows Caribbean, Venezuela, Colombia, Mexico, the drug business, you name it, everybody knew that from the beginning. So now that they themselves are forced to go in public and say, look, basic Cartel de los Soles, we invented it. Okay, wonderful. So what about the first reason to start this campaign against Venezuela? It was a lie? They will never recognize it was a lie. But now it's proven it's a lie. So what that leads us to, that the only cartel run as a mafia cartel is what I decided to call El Cartel de los Gringos. It's the American cartel. It's the Trump administration. The Trump administration is, I would say, the remix of Meyer Lansky, the Las Vegas gang, the mafia gang, the Cuban exiles in Miami, etc. This is 2.0 on steroids. They are a mafia cartel. And they're running the US like a mafia cartel. And they think that as a mafia cartel, they can run the whole of Latin America. None of that can lead us to imagine that they are harmless. No, they are very, very dangerous. And they will be even more dangerous because they are cornered. They don't have any meaningful, significant, seductive plans to sell in anywhere across the global south, especially the Western Hemisphere. The only thing that they can sell to the Western Hemisphere is the stick with no carrots this time. In the past, we all know it was sticks and carrots. Now it's only sticks. So you talked about Brazil in the beginning. As a Brazilian myself, all of you in Brazil, get ready. Be extremely alert.
Exactly.
Fight. Organize yourselves politically because never forget the number one target of the US in Latin America is the only country in Latin America that can project power even outside of the South Atlantic. Is Brazil.
Exactly.
The superpower that never was. So Brazil is in the line of fire even more now than it was a few months ago when it was just okay, hybrid war movements, war against BRICS. No, now we're getting to it's coming to the crunch, guys. Now Brazil is in the line of fire. I would say at the same level of Colombia or Mexico, not to mention Cuba and Nicaragua, of course. These are the top line of fire. Then Colombia, Mexico, and Brazil is among them as well. So, all of you in Brazil, be extremely alert, and it's time to enter the fight by all means necessary and every way you know how to do it.
Yeah. We have 12 minutes, Pepe, to
Okay.
talk about Iran.
Okay.
And let me know what are your
Oh,
question about
can I no
your
now?
questions. I'm gonna answer your questions because I know
Can I
that you're
can
in.
I interview you now, Anima? Now, okay, but everybody, now this show is is Nima being interviewed, probably for the first time in his show. Nima, you are in Tehran. Correct me if I'm wrong. There are no protests in Tehran. Number one, right?
Not. Let me put it this way, Pepe.
Okay.
I'm right now. I'm not in Tehran, but I came to the southwest of Iran in the state called Khuzestan. For 10 days,
You
I
were
arrived.
in
Yeah,
Kazakhstan.
I was. Yeah, exactly in the heart of that
You were
was
in the heart
there.
of, wow. Wow. Okay.
Let me say I got here in Iran on it was on December 20, if I'm not 26, if I'm not mistaken. For 10 days I was in Tehran,
Okay.
and I saw what was happening in the mainstream media and basically somehow in the alternative media. The coverage of what is happening in Iran, what is happening right now in Iran is somehow exaggerated, as though that all these protesters on the street, coming out and they want to do regime change and all of that. It's nonsense, Pepe.
Hmm.
It's nonsense. It's utter nonsense. And there were some sort of protests in Iran, in Tehran, in the western part that I'm right now in one of these states in the western part. And these protests basically are concerned about the economy of Iran in the case of inflation. And we know the current government is trying to do some surgical, moves, because the energy, Pepe, here is petroleum and the oil, gasoline is 1 cent.
I know. I
And
saw it a
in
few months ago when I was in Iran. Of course, yes.
and that's make a huge problem for the government here. And they have to do these changes. When you start doing these changes, you see these sort of people who are connected, people who have a lot to lose, going against the government,
And
going against this.
the purchasing power of the population is very low, essentially.
Yeah,
So if
yeah.
you end subsidies for energy, they're going to pay the price at the pump and inflation. What is the real inflation in Iran now, Nima? Real. The one that you
Yeah,
feel when you go to buy groceries.
it seems something like 30 or 35,
It's high.
something like that. Yeah,
35.
it's a lot because recently, in the recent years, it seems, as I asked, as I talk with people, it seems recently in the last 2 3 years, it seems that this situation is somehow escalating, and the government is trying to do. They used to give the dollar because you have to buy it from outside,
Sure.
and the government is under tremendous sanctions. You cannot imagine how the sanctions work. It's unbelievable looking at the situation here. And they have these people who are trying to do trades with the outside of Iran, and they have to give the dollar to these people, to these
Sure.
entities, to these companies. And this sort of process of giving the money to these people makes a lot of corruption within the system.
Of course.
That's why the government right now, the position government, is saying that we're not going to give it to the people who are, doing the trades. We're going to give it to the people who are receiving the products, you know, to just somehow resolve the problem. But it takes time,
It takes time.
and it's not just, it's not going to happen overnight. Y- but the problem is not that, Pepe. We have protests, those people who are concerned, shopkeepers, those people who are, the clients who are concerned about the inflation. That's the government tries to, to separate this sort of movement on the part of the public, these sort of protests, from riots. But we have riots here happening, because those people, those agents, as Mark Pompeo said, in that tweet, that
And they are all
Mossad
over the
agents are among you in Iran on streets. These are trying to somehow manage the protests to make them riots, and they're burning things, they're killing people, they're killing, the security guards. Today we've seen footages coming out, the ordinary people being attacked by these people
Hmm.
because they feel if you don't protest, if you don't riot, you're not Iranian. It's
Exactly.
unbelievable.
It is, but
But
it's the same playbook everywhere, Nima. It's what they can you imagine. They did this in Hong Kong, one of the most sophisticated societies on the planet, with an ultra high standard of living. They did exactly the same thing. Exactly the same thing. Look, changing a little bit and something perhaps more serious. Do you get the feeling that the IRGC and Khamenei himself, they are ready to, if they see signs of an attack, coordinated attack by Israel and the US, which is going to be all over again? Have they decided that they could launch a preemptive attack against Israel, or this is just for the moment consultations?
yeah, actually, there are discussion going on here in Iran, and I would say a good part of the IRGC believe that a preemptive attack would happen if Israel decides to attack Iran.
Hmm. Hmm.
I would say there is no difference between IRGC and the leader of Iran.
Of
They're
course,
the
of course.
same thing. And that's why I feel that if Israel tries to attack Iran, in my opinion, would go on a preemptive attack on Israel because they know what is the outcome.
Absolutely.
They experienced 12-day war here in Iran. More than 8,000 people were killed by the Israelis. They don't want that happening again.
Hmm.
And they want to show force. They want to show how serious this sort of activities on the part of Israelis is for their leadership here in Iran. And they're talking about it. I'm not making things up. They're talking
They're
about
talking about
doing
it.
a
Yeah.
preemptive attack on
There are
Israel.
echoes, there are leaks, even there. I just wanted to get from you that this is more or less sealed in stone, which is a very
Yeah,
sound policy. They simply cannot wait anymore. It's what they did the last
yeah,
time. They waited and they were caught in their sleep.
exactly. Exactly. That's the argument on the part of the commanders here. They say we cannot wait to experience, these sort of attacks on the part of Israelis and Americans. This time around, they can all come together, but we have to go against it before happening a preemptive attack. I'm sure that they're gonna do it because these people are serious people. These not just making comments, for the media. These are internal talks that mostly are not covered by the mainstream media in the West.
Exactly. Nima, your personal feeling after 2 weeks in Iran. What does your gut tell you about the real popularity of the current government? Do they have popular support? Or people think that they are a bunch of incompetents compared to the Raisi administration? How do you feel it?
Let me answer it this way. Let's assume those people who are in the streets, I would separate them in two parts. One part is the majority of those people, they really feel that the economy is not working good and the government should
It's
do
a fact.
something about it.
It's a
But
fact.
they're not against the government.
They're not
Let put
against
it
the
this way. They're not. They're just complaining about the economy, the situation of the economy of Iran. They want to, the government deal with the inflation. This is the rioters are a fraction, a tiny fraction. Even you can ignore them, in my opinion. You cannot see them you cannot see any sort of influence they have on the society.
government.
This is the I'm talking about the protesters and rioters. And when you go to the bigger picture of the population here in Iran, you see that the people, majority of the people, I'm talking about the Gen Z, the young
Gen
people,
Z.
the mostly Iranian population is, more than 60%
Yeah,
under
yeah.
the age of
Countries are young,
30.
right?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. They don't want any sort of revolution, any sort of they want to do reforms. They want to make Iran stronger. And this is this is the reason that I really feel that the West doesn't understand what's going on in Iran.
They don't.
Nobody is against, they're making a lot of miscalculations,
Mhm,
which could lead to a confrontation after all.
mhm. Yeah, very very good question. And the for instance, when I was there in what 6 7 months ago, what struck me traveling outside of Tehran is the effect, the graphic, practical effect of 40 years of sanctions. So obviously, nothing has been modernized, and it's a miracle how parts of the economy actually work without any shade of modernization. Did you have not been in Iran for a few years, right? Were you struck by that, especially when you compare the infrastructure with Brazil, with the normal
Yeah,
infrastructure in
yeah,
Brazil, right? I'm sure you were shocked about it. No?
yeah, yeah. Actually, it happens because you see a country to be under sanctions for more than 40 years, 43 years.
Yes.
And look at what has happened in Venezuela, for example. Look at what has happened in Cuba.
Or
And the
Syria.
situation in Iran, you see, is not even comparable with them, is something, but after all, you see that the same sort of signs that you've seen when you were here. But in my opinion, what is going on in the mind of the people is how we can get rid of the sanctions. We know that the United States is not serious in any sort of negotiations.
True.
And so, what is the outcome? What is the solution? It's going to be BRICS, it's going to be Global South.
What do they
This is the
tell you most?
solution.
What do they tell you most? How do they see a solution? Because they should know that these sanctions are unbreakable. Because these are
Yeah.
American
No.
sanctions submitted to Senate and Congress, they will never abolish them. So, do they have any idea of what could be done?
Yeah, they really don't see any path toward negotiation with the United States, that the negotiations would bring some sort of solution to the situation Iran is experiencing right now. That's why I really feel that the majority of the people, and I talk with many people here, my
Mhm.
friends, all, they don't see the United States being the solution, the negotiation being the solution. They want Iran to be stronger economically, militarily. That's the solution. You make Iran stronger, you're going to be in a better solution to talk with all the superpowers. And they feel that they're so much closer to Russia and China because that's the solution, that's the future for Iran.
So,
Yeah,
they believe in Russia, China, Iran partnership working practically.
exactly. Yeah, practically is working. Is
Practically.
working. Yeah, practically. Not just feeling, just working. They know that it works because all of these countries are coming together to go against the sanctions. All of them are sanctioned somehow by the United States.
Of course.
Yeah.
But
Pepe,
yes, we have to go, we have to
yeah,
finish. Oh, that's
I
okay.
have to wrap it up. Yeah,
Of course. Okay. Look, we should do this again on next week. Okay.
for sure.
You
For
have a
sure.
lot of questions for you.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you, Pepe.
Thank you
Thank
so
you
much.
so much.
Thank you, Nima. Thank you, all of you.
Grande prazer.
Isso.
Grande abraço.
Grande abraço. Bye, bye. Tchau.
Tchau, tchau.